All right, well, let's begin. Notice in the outline, we want to look at how to set up your database in Laravel. And so we want to configure that so that Laravel can access your SQLite file for you and do database operations on it. We'll go into how to create a migration, which ultimately will define our table and the fields that will define the records that it stores. And then we will look into Eloquent model, which is a nice like domain specific language, active record type of DSL, domain specific language on top of SQL instructions. So it's an object oriented DSL that helps us developers write object oriented code to interact with our database. So that's where we're going to go today. So first things first, we'll get into how to configure SQLite for Laravel. So why don't I go ahead and generate an app, Laravel new friends. So I'm going to create a friends app. So I'm going to get into friends, make sure it's working. Just kind of double check all that stuff. Refresh. Yep, looks like everything's working. So that looks good. So the next thing I want to do is jump over here, jump into the code base here. Get that looking legible. And I want to go into the over here in the database section. And what I want to do in here is actually store a SQLite file. And so I'm going to create a new file, and I'll just name it database.SQLite, like that. And just leave it empty. That's just going to represent our database, and the SQLite engine will tell Laravel to use that file to store our data for us. All right, so that's the first thing I needed to do. The next thing is I'm going to go in down here to .env, and there are some configurations in here. They're pretty much all. We're not using them. We're using app name, app key. That's behind the scenes though. But notice there's a DB connection section, and it's defaulted to MySQL, which is totally cool. If we were to set up a full-fledged database engine, this is where we would configure it. But we're gonna change Laravel because it has support for SQLite. So I changed the DB connection type to SQLite, and then I changed the database to go to our file. So remember, we created it within the database directory, and we called it database.SQLite. Okay, cool. That should be enough. I believe the username and password will be ignored in this case. So that's the second thing you'll have to do for configuration. So we created the database file within the database folder, and then we come into .env and configure our database connection. Cool. All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to test this theory out. First thing we need to test this out is we can create a migration to create a table. And if I jump over to the Laravel documentation, if you look on the left-hand side, there's a database section, and there's a subsection called migrations. And so for reference, if you need to look up syntax or more examples, definitely come here and check it out. There's just the documentation is really, really well done. So definitely come over here and check that out. So for our purposes, I'm going to jump back over, create a migration, and then we'll interact with it. But one thing I did want to point out, let me make this text a little bigger, is that Laravel comes with what are called generators. And so notice you'll see generating migrations. And there's these commands, PHP artisan make migration. And those are called generators. And that just is a way to get you up and going quickly without having to go in and hand code everything, which is fine, which is totally cool. We could hand code all of it, but there's these nice generators that get templates going for you, and then you just fill in the details. So that's what we're going to use. In this particular case, we're going to use a generator to create a migration. So I'll show you what that looks like. So let's jump back over here and look at this. We are inside of friends. Yep. And so I can run a command, PHP, artisan. Actually, you know what? I missed one step in my configuration. I need to do one more thing. I need to go to the database.php, which is, let me look for that. It's in config. Okay. So this is a third thing you need to do to config your database. So I'll make sure and add that into the notes for this. But we want to notice there's app bootstrap config, and there's a file called database. And then we want to go into here, where are you? SQLite. So for SQLite, there's a section here. We want to make sure and point the database to our file. And so I basically simplify this line to just go straight to my file. So that tells Laravel the database path to our file, and it'll take over from there. So, all right, cool. That was, I want to make sure I didn't miss that step. All right, so I'm going to close this up. Now I can go back and generate a table. Artisan and make migration, create friends, table. All right, so a couple things to note here. PHP artisan make migration. That's the generator that's built into Laravel. So we have to follow that to the letter. This next section is just the name of our migration. So I just called it create friends table. And then there's this command create equals and then friends. So friends is the name of the table that SQL is going to use to generate. So that one's, again, very important. You don't want to fat finger that and, I don't know. It's easy to do. You don't want to fat finger that because that's the name of the table that you'll be referencing in your code. So it'll look funny if that's all, misspelled. So make sure that one looks good. And typically it's like the name of the entity. So I'm interacting with a friend, and then it's plural because it's storing more than one of those. So it's convention to give it a plural name as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and we'll see if our configuration works. So if I get an error here, something's not right. If it goes through, then we should be good to go. That looks good. Actually, no, it didn't create it didn't run the SQL command in the database yet. It just created a file. So let's go open this file in our text editor. So again, making sure you can see where this is an app. By convention, there's app bootstrap config database, and then within database, there's actually a folder called migrations. And there's already some in there. There's a create users, create failed jobs, and those are built in by Laravel to be used. And so we may or may not use them, but it's just good to kind of see some other examples in there too. There's ours, create friends table, which was generated for us. And this is the part where I was talking about this using Illuminate migration, blueprint schema, this class, create friends table extends migration, this up method, and this down method. So let's take a little bit of tour of this file. This is the file. You can hand code it if you want, right? But there's just a lot of particulars in here where using the generator can get you up and going, pretty quickly and nicely. So what it does, it creates a class, create friends table, extends migration. So it's going to that's the keyword extends, basically means inherit from the migration class that's built into Laravel or Illuminate. And so that's going to give you a bunch of methods for free that we can leverage for database interactions. So in migrations, there is an up method and a down method. So the up method, when I run this migration, is going to execute this file. So it says schema create friends. So it's going to create a friends table. And by default, it's going to give it an ID and timestamp. So an ID is that auto incrementing primary key. And timestamps are like a created and updated that where it'll just timestamp activity of those records. So that's just kind of a handy thing to have around. I'm going to add my own fields in here in a minute, but just want to make a note that the down, this is something I won't demonstrate today, but in the future, I most likely will. That will actually reverse, as you see in the comment, it will reverse the migration. So the up says go ahead and execute the migration. The down, if you want to roll back, it'll actually undo, basically. It's basically a database undo operation. So notice it says drop, or basically delete this table, because that's the opposite of create. So just want to make note of it now, and that's something we may use in a future lecture. All right, so before we move on, let me add some more fields. I'm going to add a first name, add a last name, so just add some more fields that we can interact with. And so I've defined them as strings, and this one's going to be an integer. So let me save that and go back to, and we want to run this command. So just creating the file doesn't do anything with our database. We actually have to run the command to migrate. So we're going to call artisan, and it's simply just migrate. So PHP artisan migrate says go ahead and load that file up and run it. So let's try it out. Okay, database, SQL does not exist. All right, so it looks like I have a misconfiguration here. So let's go find out where that is. Let's see if I did anything in here. Let's see, database. Let's see if it looks in the database directory already for us. So I'm going to try that and migrate again. Create friends. Okay. It does not exist. So now I'm using something that doesn't exist. So maybe it's, I don't mind messing up, because this is the stuff of, this might be things you might see. String. I want to find, yeah, columns. So these are all the data types. We have big integer, booleans, decimals, doubles, and that'd be funny if there's not an integer. Maybe there's not. So I'm probably, oh wait, integer, so spelled out. All right, I'll fix that. Let's go back into our migration, integer. So instead of int. So typos, they happen, right? So we just got to make sure we know what we're looking for. So let's run this migration one more time. Beautiful. So it looks like it created the migration successfully. So how can we test that? Well, we can actually look into that file. So SQLite 3 database, database.sqlite. I'm going to jump into here and just see if there's a table that exists. And there is, friends. Awesome. So that works. Oh, I guess, you know what? Maybe while we're here, let's add some friends into here. So insert into friends, like we'll really test it out. First name, last name. Actually, I think these are SQL. So we want to update those with the values of and we'll see if that worked. Select all from friends. Sweet, so it looks like that's working. And so let's insert some more. And do another one. So if we do a select all here, we have all of our records. So it looks like our database is working. Looks like it's working just fine. So let's get out of here. That was just a nice verification that it worked. The next thing I want to do is use another generator to generate our Eloquent model. So if we look at our timeline or our outline, we've configured, we've run a migration, we've kind of verified using SQL, but let's go ahead and get into the Eloquent model section. And again, there is a documentation section on the Laravel website. So if I go down a little further, there's Eloquent ORM, getting started, and then all the documentation for a lot of ways to interact with your database using this. Pretty cool. I'm going to close my migration, go back to here. And so again, notice I'm inside of my Friends app, and this is where I can run more generators. So I'm going to generate an Eloquent model. Again, a reminder, you can write these by hand or from scratch, which is totally fine, totally cool. But the generators can just get you up and going quickly with a template to start with. So I'm going to use a PHP artisan, make model friend. So model created successfully. So what that did is it went into it created a file under app and created a file called friend. And so it put it in namespace for us. It uses the Eloquent model. It created a class which extends or inherits from an Eloquent model. So because of that, we get a bunch of things for free, right? Which is pretty cool. So, and that was another reason why it's really good to get comfortable and familiar under this app section of creating files, creating classes, how to interact with object-oriented code, because that's exactly what this was generated for, and the pattern that Laravel uses is this object-oriented pattern. So that's what we're going to do here. So with that in mind, I think we can go into Tinker and see what benefits we get from this. I'm not even writing any code, but how can we interact with our database just by extending from Eloquent model? So let's go into Tinker. And we are going to, we can walk through and do some Crud operations, which are going to be really, really handy. So I can create. So I'm going to do a friend. So I'm going to just instantiate a friend. And then I can set the values. So you can see we're basically just using this as a regular object. So where the cool part comes into play is that, yeah, in regular, if this was just an in-memory object, it would die, right, after I exit Tinker. Well, in order to preserve it, all I need to do is call save, and that came back successful. So what that means now is that I could call another command called all, and all is the equivalent of select all from friends, the SQL statement. So if I do that, here's the magic, right? Here are all those other records that we created from the SQLite interface to this database. So where we once were in a SQLite interface, now we're in our Tinker Eloquent model interface, right? This is Tinker. So there's the other fields or the other records that I created, Carmen Blake, Jane Doe, John Doe, using SQL. But here is the friend that we actually created just now using Eloquent model. So what we get for free is, notice how all of these get created, instantiated into a friend object, and put into an array for us to interact with. And notice what type it is. It's an Eloquent collection. So that's something that we've been using for quite some time now in our PHP apps, is this Eloquent collection. That's going to give us a lot of powerful tools that are going to allow us to interact with this collection. So that's awesome. So another thing we can do is, so we created and viewed and read. We can also, there's also a shorthand notation to update or create a record. So let me show you what that looks like. In order to do that, we are going to update our model, and we want to do protected. There's this special variable called fillable, and it's just an array of attributes. And what that's going to do is allow us to do a mass assignment or mass assignment for creations and updates. And so this is a very special, that Eloquent model looks for to determine if you can do mass creations or updates. And so let me show you what that means. So if I go back to Tinker, the way I created the friend before is line by line, I instantiated a friend and then assigned each variable one at a time. So there's a better way. Okay, so I can also go right to the friend and create from here and just pass in an associative array. So for each attribute, we'll give it a value. So, and we can't do this special syntax, this one line thing. We can't do that unless we do this special setup first. So that's kind of a key point there. So let me go ahead and hit enter here, and notice it came back successful, created the friend object, created an ID, which is a good indicator that the object was saved. And so now I can do the all command, and notice, yeah, Martin Smith is in there. Cool, so it's coming together. We can do some other, so we've been doing a lot of, like, in the Crud database operations, we've been doing a lot of creates, so we can do more reads. So I can look up a friend by its ID, right? We can look up, if we know the ID, that works really well. We can also look up friends by certain conditions. So there's a first where last name, I could do last name, Blake. Okay. So it can look up a record by a certain field. That will only get you one friend at a time, though, so you can also just do a where, which says find all things that are, so all that with, oops, friends and values, is that what it is? Maybe we go look that up. Get, so let's go do that. Oh, except I needed to assign it to friends. I think I did, yeah, one thing I did want to specify is that app.where gives you a collection. So in order to get them all, maybe that shortcut will work. So app friend where last name is Doe, well, there's more than one of those. So I need to get them, assign them to a variable called friends. And then notice there's two records with the last name Doe. So that's a way to get more than one record, for a particular case or scenario that you need to do. Okay, so next we can create, read with conditions. We can update, so I can get a friend. I'll just grab the first one and friend, right? I can update things here, and then friend save. And so then I can look at the updated value and notice age is now 66. So again, interacting with either creating or updating is just, you're writing object-oriented code, and that's kind of the whole purpose of this ORM, this Eloquent model. There's also, you can do like a mass assignment update. And so I can do something like this. I can notice I need to find it first. So where ID is 1, and I can call this update and give it an associative array of fields and values that I want to update. So whoops, no. Okay, so I can look that up again, and there it was updated to 92. So this was, I was able to find and update all in one line. So awesome. And the last operation I want to show you was delete. And again, this one's pretty easy. I can, again, find friend and then friend delete is how you call that. So I just basically deleted myself. So if I pull up all the friends, notice there's no Carmen Blake in here anymore because he was deleted. Cool. All right, well, that's all I had to cover today in this lecture. We went through and configured our app to use SQLite so that we can do some database stuff. We generated migration, which then we filled in the table fields to create a table. And then we interacted with our data using Eloquent model, which gives us a really nice object-oriented syntax to create, read, update, and delete our records in our database. So it's hugely beneficial. We'll want to practice this, get more comfortable with it, and then we'll be using this in subsequent applications where we actually can interact with our database and then display them on a web page and interact with them on a web page in a CRUD fashion. So until then, have a good day.